Hi and welcome back to Bike Speed. So this week we're going to restore and recommission this Raleigh Record Sprint. It's an absolute classic bike, and as you can see from this one, it's quite neglected, but we're going to do everything on this bike. So we're doing all the bearing work, so front wheel bearings, rear wheel bearings, bottom bracket bearings, headset bearings, pedal bearings, everything. New cables, new chain, new tyres. We're really going to make this bike absolutely outstanding condition. So as you can see here, the bike is quite neglected, quite dusty. This has actually been hung up in a garage for a bit of time, so it's dried out, got a little bit of surface rust on it. So we're going to clean this one right up so that this bike is ready to ride any distance once it's completed. First things first, I'm going to start stripping the bike down. So you can see here we've got a few cables that are frayed off and a little bit sad, but that doesn't matter because we're going to replace all the cables on this bike as we do it. You can see here the rear derailleur itself has been well used. This bike has been ridden in the past. You have to remember that at one point in its life this bike was a brand new bike, so it would have done the mileage. And you can see here from the components as I take them off, they've got that road film and debris on them, which shows that this bike has been used in the past, and it just needs a good cleanup and a good service to get it to do a few more miles. I initially take off all the components off the bike. So as you can see there, I'm taking the chain set off. You can see that's a little bit grimy. This actually came up lovely, so you'll enjoy that process with us. And then I'm also going to remove this bottom bracket, including the cups and the bearings. You can see there how that grease has got a shine to it. It's actually very dry. That's where the grease has dried itself out. So by cleaning it up, putting fresh grease in there, that will make that bottom bracket so much nicer than at the moment that when it came in for this service. We are stripping this bike fully back to the frame because we want to polish and ceramic coat it. So we're going to get every component off the bike, which included those levers for the shifters. The brakes are going to come off. We're also taking the brake pads off now as they've gone hard. You might have noticed here this is the gold edition, so we've got the gold brake calipers, the gold chain set, the gold brake levers, a few other little gold details on this bike that really make it contrast between the black and the gold. You might notice here that we've actually got a silver brake lever here on the left hand shift. That is because the customer told me that he had actually had an accident on this bike in its past when he was much younger, and that he swapped that lever out for a silver one because at the time that was all he had available to him or that he could get. I don't know the story there, but that's why it has a silver one. We did actually manage to get a gold lever for the front. The saddle here looks like it's seen better days, so that's coming off. The accessory bolts came out no problem, which isn't always the case. Now I'm going to strip down the chain set ready for the ultrasonic cleaner. The bolts on that were loose and barely finger tight. It's the same story with the rear derailleur. Take that apart so the ultrasonic cleaner can work its magic. The jockey wheels on this derailleur don't have the bearings in them, so they can go through as well. We're scraping off some of the hard grease to help it out. You can see here the debris on this rear derailleur, a lot of build up of debris there. That shows to me that these parts need cleaning and that it's a well used bike and that those will be dragging through the chain. So I want to clean everything up as best as possible, and that's what I'm doing here. They've been through the ultrasonic cleaner. Now I'm just washing them down with a detailing brush and warm soapy water to get that degreaser off of the component to make sure, look at this, look, wow how that came up. Make sure these components come up nicely, ready for re-lubricating, and that everything is spot on. This chain set, I was amazed the shine underneath that dirt and debris. It looked quite matte when it came in, but once I washed it off, you can see that reflection beginning to build on that component. So I was well pleased with that chain set and the way that came up. Axle on the bottom bracket there, give that a clean up as well, and now we start our lubricating process. So you can see there our lubricants that we use during these services. We're lubricating those jockey wheels with our premium grease before we'll put that back together with the derailleur. This derailleur was lovely because it didn't have a rear cage on it, just had this subtle little silver cage on the bottom here on this bottom derailleur that was held with a square taper on the bolt itself to hold that in position. It was quite a nice derailleur, this one, and it even had the gold lettering on the Shimano logo there to match the gold on the rest of the bike. So quite a nice few little touches on this derailleur itself. And we're going to use our general purpose oil there, lovely thin oil on the pivot points, just to help those actuate and to make sure that derailleur is working as we need it to. Again with this front derailleur, thin oils on the pivot points, our premium grease on the spring, and I even lubricate, and I always do this, you'll see this in other videos and other services, always make sure that I lubricate the thumb adjusters, because they will corrode and they will stick and bind. It just helps your future adjustments on a brake or a derailleur as you move forward. And I'm using some silicone there on the slider of the spring itself. New pads on those, they're still available, so we'll put new ones on those, and a little bit of copper grease on the threads of the chain set bolts themselves, so that they don't bind and it can be took apart for future servicing without any issues. These are very specific to this chain set, so you could argue, well, we could have got gold ones, but they wouldn't have fitted this. They're a much narrower bolt than a modern chain set bolt, so it was important there that we kept those bolts in premium condition with the lubricating of them. Next up, I'm going to put new bearings in this rear wheel. This is the non-original rear wheel that tells the story of his crash on this bike, so we'll make sure that we get this bike and the rear wheel operating exactly as we want them. Out come the old bearings, the bearing covers there. I'll get all those cleaned up in the ultrasonic cleaner before we put the new bearings in. You can see even the axle here comes up nice. If we do ultrasonic clean that and then clean that down, it will allow the cups to glide on and off of those threads much easier than the way they came apart. I'm going to clean up the teeth on the rear block, as you would call it on a bike of this age, so we just clean that up. There was very little wear on this rear block, so I would imagine that this has been replaced at some point in the life of the bike, maybe during that crash period, and then maybe the bike hadn't been used much after that, so there was very little wrong with that. So we clean up the cups on the rear wheel there, and I make sure that everything around what I'm going to put in is clean before I put those bearings in. So I'll do that hub and just wash down the wheel as well to check the integrity of it. And while I was doing this, I did notice that some of the spokes were quite loose on this wheel, so I felt that it would need a retension, so we're going to do that as well during this. But initially, premium grease, our lovely thick premium grease, which you can buy on our website. The link is in the description of the video for that, and it's worth a look if you do any kind of work on your own bike. New bearings in there, tap that little bearing cover back on, same on the other side, and then we can put the axle in and get this wheel back together. Using a little bit of the residue grease there to lubricate the threads so that I can put those cups back on with absolute relative ease. Really, they were quite hard to get off and they spun on by hand to go back on. On goes the block now, so that's going back onto the wheel, and I will torque that up 40 newton meters on that one just to make sure it's right. Now, I took a little bit of artistic license on this one. The tyres needed replacing because they were old rubber and they were crabby, so I actually replaced the tyres on this bike with full black tyres, and I also picked a tyre that had no logo on it because I really wanted the gold to contrast the blacks and I didn't want the tan walls to show through. You can see here the right hand valve cap there is the original, the left hand valve cap is a modern one. The right hand one was very of the period and of the time of the bike, so I made sure that I salvaged those and put those back on the new valve on the bike. Next up, I'm going to just check the tensions on the wheel. So you can see there on the left the before and after graphs. You can see how bad that tension was on that wheel when it came in, and I got that to within 5% all the way around. So the wheel now is absolutely spot on, and it's now centered. It was actually off center as well, so I've centered that, and I'm quite happy with that wheel to go back on. We also did that to the front wheel as well. You can see here a lot of play in these pedals, an awful lot of play in these. I actually don't think the bearings were too bad. I think it was just adjustment. But we are doing a full recommissioning on this bike, so as with everything else, I've stripped that down. We'll clean up all these components and we'll put new bearings in there as well. So everything goes in the ultrasonic cleaner there, everything washed down. It's a good way of actually getting those canvas straps nice and clean as well by putting those through the ultrasonic cleaner. So that's why I put the entire pedal in there. Clean down the cups as well, and then again, same process as with the hubs and any other bearing work we do. Premium grease to support the bearings, brand new bearings in there. On goes the pedal, new set of bearings in the other side of the pedal, and then I can adjust that up and get it absolutely spot on, and that's what we did here. So in goes the old cup and cone, and on goes the adjustment bolt, and now we've got that pedal absolutely spot on. Very common this on headset bearings, especially of this period. They're sitting and tramwaying into the outer race, so the bike would be hard to ride freely. It would tramway as you were riding along, so we are going to do the front bearings on this as well. Now, one thing to notice here is the old bearings that came out are a race, so that's balls sitting in their own casing, and then we're going to replace those with ball bearings all the way around, and I'll tell you why that is as we do that. So we clean up this steerer tube, especially those threads at the top, pay a little bit of attention to those. And you can see here, that looks like a brand new steerer tube to me. So now we clean the cups up with the wire wool and degreaser, and then I'm going to start replacing those ball races with ball bearings. And the reason I do that is so that they support the steerer tube more evenly and you don't get any tram lines build up in the cup themselves. So you can see there, I'm putting loose balls in, you get more balls in the space, which means you get more support to the bearing itself, and it's just a little bit nicer and a little bit better than having races. Same with the bottom bracket bearings, I'll put loose balls in those rather than using races. They're just a little bit more tricky to actually fit, so that's why factories tend to use races rather than loose balls. That's the headset sorted, and another tick on the list of jobs to do. Next up, we're going to detail the frame, so I'm going to wash that down. I'm using a detailing brush there on all the lugs and in general around the entire frame, just to give that a little bit of a sympathetic wash down, but to be able to really work in the corners, like down here on the bottom bracket and in the lugs of the bike, to really bring those up. Detailing brushes we also sell on our website, so please do check out bikespeeds.com. You'll find all the cleaning products on there. It's a one-stop shop for everything we use in the videos, including this resin polish. The Auto Glim is a lovely creamy polish, works very well on a bike like this. It will protect that paint, it will moisten it up. And what we're trying to achieve here with a bike where we're doing an original restoration like this is to polish up what's left between the rust. So we get all that original paint that is left on the bike to an absolute crisp shine, and that then takes your eye away from corroded areas of the bike, the patina of the bike, and it makes it absolutely shine, and it can transform a bike. And then I'm now using the ceramic spray, so I'm spraying over the bike to make sure that we give that final layer of protection against water and the elements, and it will really bring that shine to the bike. Once that's done, it looks really, really nice. I'm going to also clean up the handlebar, the quill and the stem and everything on that there, to make sure that that's nice and shiny when we put the new handlebar sponges back onto this bike. This bike had sponges rather than handlebar tape, and we're going to actually keep that for the customer. He does like his comfort, this customer. He's actually a family friend. We go back a long way as families, and it was a pleasure to do this bike for this customer. This was a one owner from New Bike. Like I say, this customer is one of our personal friends, so it was a very enjoyable bike to do this restoration to. So on go these sponges now. We're using hair lacquer on there just to bond them to the handlebars and to stop them turning in the future. Cut those off, get them all nice, and that's ready to go back on the bike, which is what we're doing there. Again, as I mentioned with the bottom bracket, I'm putting loose balls in here rather than a ball race. It supports that bearing a little bit better, and it's quite easy to do with our premium grease. It will just hold bearings against gravity. It's a creamy consistency, but it's just thick enough to support the weight of bearings when you're doing this kind of work where you need the bearing to stay in the cup before you put it together. So a little bit of copper grease on the thread. You can see how that's spun in by hand. So we've really got those threads nice, and we've really got the condition of the threads okay before we put everything back together. Again, the other cup there, straight on by hand, no need for tools, just it up, everything's perfect. A little bit of copper grease on the thread for the chain set bolt. On goes that chain set. I mean, that chain set, look at that, what a huge difference. And you can also see the reflection in the back of there on that lugged area. Look at the shine on that paint. All the chrome components came up great. The bearing cups were the highlight. That lock ring looks night and day from before. So on goes the front derailleur now. Again, that's all nicely lubricated and nicely cleaned. Same with the rear. Everything's beginning to look nice. On go those shifters. So I'm very, very pleased with the way this bike's coming together at this point. And now we're going to put new cables right the way through the bike. And these are one of those hidden secrets of a bike restoration. Often original cables are galvanized steel, so they tone off, they go dull, and they often go rusty, and they go brown, and they don't look very nice. If you get a nice high quality stainless steel cable like these, when you do your restorations, it's those that create the reflection and the new feel to a bike and the new look to a bike that really makes a huge difference to the way it presents a bike of this nature when you've done your restoration on it. So we're putting those brakes on, those lovely gold brakes. In go the new cables. We're using the original outers there because they are the gold reflective outers, and they would be very hard to source in the modern world, so we're using those original outers. There was actually very little wrong with them. I cleaned those up as well so that they looked almost like new, and with the new cables inside them, they'll certainly actuate as good as a new cable, so they're looking really nice now. On go those pedals, so we're using again a little bit of copper grease on the thread there to get those back in. And with these, there wasn't many fittings that we actually torqued on this bike, but bottom bracket and the chain set and everything there, I will torque those with this bike. The bike never had a saddle on it when it arrived. The saddle was missing, so we found that saddle and we just popped that on there. It's of the period and of the time. That's the front and rear wheel back in and locked off. A new gold chain on this one, which is another touch that really added to the bike. We think we got just the right balance of originality and new parts to make it run as it needs to. Then it's time to check the gears. These are essentially self-adjusting, but we still checked all the positioning of the derailleurs. As you can see, they went up and down good as new. Last thing to check is the brakes. They were actually a fiddle to adjust, which is the case sometimes with older parts, but we got there in the end. There's just a few settings here that we can do with a torque wrench. Most of this bike is bolted together and done by feel, but there are one or two here that are important to torque and to get right. So as you can see from this before and after, a massive transformation. We didn't have a video out last week because this bike took us an awful long time to do, and Simon spent hours filming this, hours editing it. So I'd like to thank Simon for his effort on the channel and to bring you this video, because he's made a remarkable job of this. And I hope you've enjoyed this restoration recommissioning, and do drop a comment in the comments below if you've enjoyed this video and you'd like to see a few more like this. And don't forget to subscribe, like, and please do check out our website. Have a look over there. Most of the products we use in this video are over there available. We do ship worldwide, so you're more than welcome to place an order over there. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you again soon. Bye for now.